My mother locked me in a soundproof closet and poisoned me into silence, then blamed what she did on mental health. I exposed her, got her convicted, and moved on. She just reached out after 5 years. Growing up, my mom had misophonia. For those who don't know, it's where you genuinely just cannot stand any loud sounds. And, in my mom's case, they made her sewers lidle. My first memory is when I was 6 years old, and my mom stuffed a dirty dish towel in my mouth because, in her defense, I was crying my eyes out after a simple fall. If I ever snored too loudly, she would play a very loud sound horn in my room until I woke up. This was to negatively reinforce my bad behavior, so that I would have an easier time not doing it, so I ought to thank her. And on my 9th birthday, she got me a gift. It was a homemade report card, with rows that were completely empty. She called it the quiet points system. Suddenly, everything clicked, because for the weeks leading up to this moment, she had labeled all the food in the kitchen with a sticky note that had a number on it. Bread was 2 points, while all the meat was at least 10 points or higher. You earned points through being quiet, and the times I found it hardest were the ones that earned more. For example, being quiet while I showered was only 3 points, while not snoring was given 8. She could never take points away for no reason, but I would have to spend it on food, meaning I'd always have to do something to earn it. And at the time, I was just a 9-year-old with big brown eyes filled with light, and a heart that loved her mommy. So I just shrugged and wrapped my arms around her, not saying a word so as to not trigger her misophonia. Plus, I was used to being quiet anyway, so I didn't think this would change anything. The next morning when I woke up, I followed my usual routine. Slowly drew back the curtains, waited until I arrived at the school bathrooms to get changed out of my pajamas, all whilst having an overly grimaced face, all in the name of keeping the house quiet. And apparently this pleased my mom a lot, because when I got home from school, she handed me the report card she had gotten me for my birthday. In big bold lettering it said 30 points, followed by multiple smiley faces and hearts. And before I could say anything, she opened the fridge and showed me the selection I had to pick from for dinner. I could pretty much afford everything except my favorite ice cream, so I chose my favorite, steak. And we enjoyed it together like any other healthy family. Lol JK. She made the steak extremely overcooked, so I couldn't swallow it without chewing super hard. And as a misophonic person, mouth sounds are deadly to my mother. I tried to chew extremely slowly, producing as much saliva as possible to help break down the meat. After 5 minutes of painfully slow chewing one piece, I couldn't take it anymore. I discreetly spit it out into a tissue, deciding I would eat nothing that day. But she still wasn't happy. "What the F are you doing?" my mom yelled. "A cow died for you today. The least you can do is eat it all. Put it back in your mouth, now." My tiny fingers immediately unraveled the white tissue and shoved it back into my mouth. On the way in, I had my mouth open and my tongue smacked against the roof of my mouth. I immediately went completely still, hoping she wouldn't notice, but I was too late. The room was silent as she banged both her fists against the flowery tablecloth. "You disgraceful beach!" she yelled at the top of her lungs. She grabbed the report card back from me and burned it on the stove. "You think I can't make you suffer the same way you make me suffer? Think again." I was already in a lot of fear, but that's when she grabbed my hands and shoved them towards the stove. "The burning pain you feel is only 20% of how I feel when you make noise. Remember that." Luckily, she never actually put my hand in the fire, and I didn't burst into tears. Heck, it didn't even make me cry. Not because I didn't feel upset, I did. And not because I didn't want to, I absolutely did. But because I didn't want my mom to punish me for making noise while crying. So I quietly tiptoed to bed and ended up having oxygen for dinner, and breakfast, and lunch, and dinner again. You see, that one moment had made me go into the minus zone on my meal points. So I had nothing to buy my meals with. But my mom was a good person. She wasn't like other abusive parents that keep you healthy enough so as to not raise alarm bells. So after 3 days of pure starvation, I fainted in school. It was only for 20 seconds, but everyone was really worried, especially since the first thing I said when I woke up was, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to fall so loudly, please don't starve me anymore." Lol. The guidance counselor pulled me into her room and handed me a Hershey's milk chocolate bar, a banana, and a Kind bar. I chewed them so quickly I was gagging. When I was done, I looked back up at her and her eyes were filled with tears, while her face went ghost white. She didn't even ask or say anything, just told me they were calling CPS. The guidance counselor's hands shook as she reached for her phone. I watched her dial the numbers, each beep making my stomach twist tighter. She kept glancing at me between pressing buttons, like she was checking I wouldn't disappear. "Yes, this is Mrs. Henderson at Oakwood Elementary. I need to report a case of suspected child abuse and neglect." Her voice cracked on the last word. She gave them our address, my name, my mother's name. Each detail felt like another nail in a coffin I couldn't identify yet. While she talked, I sat completely still. My body had learned that stillness meant safety, that movement created sound, and sound created pain. Even with my stomach finally full, the habit remained. I counted my breath silently, making sure each inhale and exhale made no noise. Mrs. Henderson hung up and turned back to me. "Sweetie, some people are going to come talk to you. They just want to make sure you're safe." She pulled her chair closer, and the scraping sound made me flinch. "Can you tell me more about what's been happening at home?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. The words felt too loud before I even spoke them. But Mrs. Henderson waited, her face patient and kind in a way that made my chest hurt. "My mom has misophonia," I whispered, so quietly she had to lean forward. "Sounds make her want to hurt herself, so I have to be quiet. And the food? Tell me about not being able to eat." I explained the point system, how I earned quiet points for not making sounds, how each food cost points, how I'd gone negative after making a mouth sound while eating. Mrs. Henderson's face got paler with each detail. She made me put the chewed up meat back in my mouth from the tissue, I added, the memory making my stomach turn. Then she held my hands near the stove. She said the burning was only 20% of how sounds made her feel. Mrs. Henderson wrote everything down, her pen moving fast text across the paper. How long has this been happening? The point system started on my birthday, but the being quiet, I tried to think back. Always. She put a dish towel in my mouth when I was 6 because I cried after falling, and she uses a sound horn when I snore. The door opened and Principal Morrison walked in with 2 people I didn't recognize. A woman with short gray hair and kind eyes, and a younger man with a clipboard. "This is Ms. Rodriguez from Child Protective Services," Principal Morrison said, "and Mr. James, her colleague. They're here to help." Ms. Rodriguez sat down across from me. "Hi there. I know this might be scary, but we're here to make sure you're safe. Can you tell me what happened today?" I repeated the story, each telling making it feel more real and more terrifying. They asked questions about bruises. I didn't have any visible ones. About how often I ate, depending on my points. About whether anyone else knew. No one. "We're going to need to go to your house," Ms. Rodriguez said gently, "to talk to your mom and see your living situation. But first, I think the nurse should check you over. Make sure you're physically okay." The walk to the nurse's office felt endless. Other kids were in class, their muffled voices coming through doorways. Normal kids who could laugh and talk and eat without earning it. Nurse Patricia weighed me first. 72 pounds, she said, frowning. "That's quite underweight for your age and height." She checked my blood pressure, looked in my eyes and throat, listened to my heart. Each test required me to move or breathe in ways that made sound, and I kept apologizing. "Honey, you don't need to apologize for breathing," she said, but I couldn't stop. She documented everything while Ms. Rodriguez watched. The way my ribs showed, the dark circles under my eyes, how I flinched at every sound I made. "When did you last eat before today?" Nurse Patricia asked. 3 days ago. I had steak, but I couldn't chew it quietly enough." She exchanged looks with Ms. Rodriguez. "We need to take her to the hospital for a full evaluation." "No!" The word burst out louder than I'd spoken in months. "My mom will know. She'll know I made noise that I told. I couldn't finish. "Your mom is going to be contacted regardless," Ms. Rodriguez said, "but you won't be going home until we've investigated. You're safe now." But I didn't feel safe. I felt exposed, like I'd broken every rule that kept me alive. My breathing got faster, louder, and I couldn't make it stop. The panic made more noise, gasping, wheezing, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Nurse Patricia grabbed a paper bag. "Breathe into this. It's okay to make noise. You're safe." The principal's phone rang. "Yes, Mrs. Chen is here. I see. Yes, I'll let them know." He hung up. "Your mother just arrived. She's demanding to take you home." My whole body went rigid. Ms. Rodriguez noticed. "She can't take you anywhere right now. We have a legal hold while we investigate." They moved me to a small conference room away from the main office. I could hear my mother's voice getting closer, using her fake nice tone she saved for other adults. "I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. My daughter has such an active imagination. You know how children can be. Mrs. Chen, I'm Ms. Rodriguez from CPS. We need to speak with you about some concerns that have been raised." "Concerns? This is ridiculous. My daughter has some behavioral issues we're working through. She's in therapy for attention-seeking behavior." I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, but years of training kept me silent. Through the door, I heard my mother explain her condition, how hard it was to live with misophonia, how she did her best despite her disability. "We'll need to visit your home," Ms. Rodriguez said, "and speak with your daughter's therapist." "Of course. You'll see everything is fine. In fact, I just went grocery shopping yesterday. The fridge is fully stocked." My heart sank. She'd prepared. Somehow she'd known this was coming and prepared. Mr. James stayed with me while Ms. Rodriguez and another CPS worker went with my mother. Principal Morrison sat with us too, offering me water that I was too scared to drink because swallowing made noise. "The therapist she mentioned," I whispered to Mr. James. "I've never been to therapy." He made a note. "We'll verify everything she tells us." Hours passed. I dozed off in the chair, exhausted from the stress and the first full meal I'd had in days. When I woke, Ms. Rodriguez was back, her face carefully neutral. "We visited your home," she said. "Your mother showed us a fully stocked kitchen, your clean bedroom. Everything appeared normal." My chest tightened. "The point system chart? We didn't see anything like that. Your mother said she uses a standard behavior chart for chores." No, it was on the fridge, with all the sticky notes on the food, but even as I said it, I knew she'd removed everything. "We'll keep investigating," Ms. Rodriguez assured me, "but for tonight, since we can't find immediate evidence of physical abuse or neglect, you'll need to go home. However, we'll be doing follow-up visits and interviews." The room spun. They were sending me back. Principal Morrison protested. The child fainted from starvation. The nurse documented her being severely underweight. Her mother showed us medical records indicating an eating disorder. Said she's been trying to get her daughter help, but she refuses to eat. "That's not true!" But my voice was so quiet from years of practice that it barely carried. Ms. Rodriguez knelt beside me. "I believe something is wrong here, but legally, without evidence, I can't remove you from your home yet. Here's my card. Call me if anything happens. We'll be back tomorrow for a follow-up." The drive home with my mother was silent. Not the comfortable quiet of two people at peace, but the terrifying silence before a storm. She didn't speak until we pulled into our driveway. "You've made things very difficult," she said, her voice deadly calm. "But don't worry, I have a solution." Inside, I saw what she meant. The kitchen looked normal, full of food, no point system, no sticky notes. But in my room sat a pair of noise-canceling headphones and a white noise machine. "Your new therapist recommended these," she said, though I knew there was no therapist. "You'll wear them whenever you're home except for meals. Doctor's orders for your sensory processing disorder." She put them on my head and turned on the white noise. The world disappeared into a rushing sound like ocean waves. I couldn't hear her footsteps, couldn't hear if she was approaching, couldn't hear anything but the endless white static. I pulled them off. "I can't! Put them back on!" Her scream made me comply instantly. She held up a piece of paper. "Doctor's note. If you don't follow treatment, it's medical non-compliance. That would look very bad for your little CPS friends." The headphones went back on. The white noise filled my world. I watched her mouth move but heard nothing. She pointed to my desk where homework waited, then left. perfect. I sat at my desk, the white noise drowning everything. When I tried to remove them to use the bathroom, she appeared immediately, pointing at the doctor's note. I learned to lip-read bathroom, and she'd nod permission for temporary removal. Dinner was the only reprieve. She'd tap my shoulder, remove the headphones, and we'd eat in silence. Real food now. She kept the fridge stocked, but the silence felt heavier than before. CPS will be back tomorrow, she said during dinner. You'll tell them the headphones are helping your condition, that you're eating well, that everything is fine. I nodded. What else could I do? That night, the headphones stayed on even in bed. The white noise made it impossible to know if she was in my room, watching. I lay rigid, afraid to move, afraid to make sounds I couldn't hear myself making. The next day at school was freedom. I could hear again, though every sound felt overwhelming after hours of white noise. Mrs. Henderson checked on me. How did yesterday go? She asked gently. I wanted to tell her about the headphones, the fake doctor's note, the new system of control, but I knew my mother would have an explanation for everything. She has the house full of food now, I said instead. Mrs. Henderson frowned. And you're eating? Yes, but something's still wrong, isn't it? I nodded, tears threatening. She has these headphones. Mrs. Henderson leaned closer, her expression shifting to concern. Headphones? What kind of headphones? Before I could explain further, the classroom door opened. My mother stood there with her practiced smile, holding a manila folder. Sorry to interrupt. I just need to drop off some medical documentation for the office. My blood turned to ice. Mrs. Henderson straightened up, maintaining her professional demeanor. Of course, Mrs. Chen. I'll make sure it gets to the right place. Actually, I was hoping to speak with you briefly about my daughter's new treatment plan. My mother's eyes found mine, and though her smile never wavered, the warning was clear. Her therapist says it's important all her teachers understand her sensory processing disorder. Mrs. Henderson glanced at me, then back at my mother. I have a few minutes before my next class. They stepped into the hallway. Through the small window in the door, I watched my mother hand over papers, gesturing as she spoke. Mrs. Henderson nodded along, occasionally looking troubled, but ultimately accepting whatever story my mother was spinning. When Mrs. Henderson returned alone, her face had changed. The concern was still there, but now mixed with something else. Doubt. Your mother explained about the headphones, she said carefully. She showed me the treatment plan from Dr. Nichols. There is no Dr. Nichols, I whispered desperately. Mrs. Henderson's expression grew complicated. She had official letterhead, detailed treatment notes dating back months. She said you might say that denying medical help is part of your condition. The trap was perfect. Every protest I made would only confirm my mother's story about attention-seeking behavior and treatment resistance. I felt the walls closing in again, tighter than before. During math class, I noticed my mother hadn't left. Through the window, I saw her in the main office, chatting with the secretary, laughing at something on her phone, volunteering, she'd probably say, being an involved parent. At lunch, I sat alone as usual, mechanically eating the sandwich my mother had packed. Real food, nutritious and filling, evidence of her good parenting. Across the cafeteria, I noticed a substitute teacher I'd never seen before. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with short dark hair and observant eyes that seemed to take in everything. The afternoon dragged on. Every time I passed the office, my mother was still there, filing papers, answering phones, making herself indispensable. When the final bell rang, she was waiting by my classroom. Ready to go home, sweetheart? Her voice was honey sweet for the other parents nearby. In the car, her facade dropped. That was a warning. Every word you speak at school, I'll know about. Every teacher you try to manipulate, I'll get to first. The documentation is extensive and thoroughly believable. At home, the headphones went on immediately. The white noise crashed over me like a wave, drowning out the world. I did homework in silence, ate dinner in brief reprieves, then back to the rushing static that made my head ache. Days blurred together. The headphones left marks on my head from the constant pressure. My ears rang even during the brief moments without them. At school, I moved through classes like a ghost, too exhausted to focus, too afraid to speak up again. The substitute teacher appeared more frequently. Ms. Seeby, I learned from overhearing other teachers. She subbed for different classes, but I noticed her watching me during lunch, during recess, quick glances that lingered just a moment too long. One day, she was substituting for my regular teacher. As she wrote math problems on the board, I found myself tapping my pencil against my desk, unconsciously at first, then with more purpose. Short taps and long taps. A pattern I'd seen in an old movie my mother had let me watch before the point system started. Ms. Seeby's hand paused mid-equation. She turned slowly, her eyes finding mine. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she returned to the board, but I saw her hand trembling slightly. After class, as students filed out, she called out, "Could you stay for a moment? I have a question about your homework." My mother wasn't in the office that day. She had a dentist appointment she couldn't reschedule. I approached Ms. Seeby's desk cautiously. She pulled out a piece of paper and wrote, "Are you okay?" I stared at the words, then at her. She tapped the paper, once short, twice long, once short, then pointed at me with raised eyebrows. My hand shook as I took the pencil. Instead of writing, I tapped on the paper. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. Her face went pale. She wrote quickly, "Who is hurting you?" I glanced at the door, then tapped again. More complex this time, spelling out slowly, M-O-M. Ms. Seeby's jaw tightened. She wrote, "I'll help. Be careful. Act normal." I nodded and hurried out, my heart pounding. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope, but hope was dangerous. That evening, my mother was different, watchful. She made me remove the headphones during dinner but didn't speak, just studied me with calculating eyes. "Interesting day at school?" she finally asked. I shook my head, focusing on my chicken. "Ms. Seeby seems nice, young, idealistic. Probably thinks she can save the world one student at a time." Her tone was casual, but I heard the threat underneath. Shame she's only temporary. I heard she might be transferred to another district soon. My hand stilled on my fork. She knew. Somehow, she always knew. The next day, Ms. Seeby wasn't there, or the next. When I finally saw her again a week later, she was substituting for the art teacher. She wouldn't meet my eyes. During art class, while working on a painting, I found a small folded note tucked under my paint palette. I carefully unfolded it beneath my desk. Your mother visited my apartment. She knows where I live. I'm sorry. I crumpled the note, despair washing over me. Even Ms. Seaby, trained to recognize Morse code, probably former military or something, was powerless against my mother's manipulation. The weeks crawled by. My weight dropped again despite the regular meals. The constant white noise left me disoriented, stumbling into walls, unable to gauge distance or sound. At school, teachers grew concerned, but my mother always had an explanation. Adjustment period to new medication, sensory integration therapy, breakthrough treatments for my condition. Then came the family therapy sessions. My mother had found a therapist, Dr. Klaus, who specialized in difficult children. The first session, I tried to tell the truth. She makes me wear headphones all the time at home, I said, the words feeling strange after so much silence. With white noise so loud I can't hear anything. Dr. Klaus nodded thoughtfully. And why do you think your mother implements this treatment? It's not treatment. She just doesn't want to hear me exist. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. You see, this is what I deal with. The aggression, the accusations. I've tried everything to help her. I understand this must be very difficult, Dr. Klaus said to my mother. Children with oppositional defiant disorder often reject helpful interventions. I don't have that, I protested. Interrupting, arguing, refusing to comply with reasonable requests. Dr. Klaus made notes. Classic presentations. My mother pulled out her phone. I've actually been recording some of her behaviors at home, for documentation purposes. She played a recording. It was my voice, but distorted, edited. Sounds of me supposedly slamming doors, stomping, screaming, things I'd never done, couldn't do without severe punishment. But the audio was convincing. I stammered. Denial is also typical, Dr. Klaus said. Mrs. Chen, I think we need to consider more intensive interventions. The sessions became weekly torture. My mother would play her edited recordings, show her fabricated documentation, cry about how hard she tried. Dr. Klaus ate it up, prescribing medications that made me foggy, recommending stricter behavioral controls, validating every twisted narrative my mother spun. I stopped protesting. What was the point? Every word I said was twisted. Every truth I told became evidence of my condition. At school, I grew more isolated. The other kids whispered about the weird girl who wore headphones at home, who had to see a special doctor, who made up stories about her mom. Even teachers kept their distance, warned by my mother about my manipulative tendencies. One day, in desperation, I started leaving tiny notes in hidden places, under desks, behind books, in bathroom stalls, simple messages, help me. My mom is lying. Please believe me. For a week, nothing happened. Then I saw my mother in the library volunteering again. She was thorough, cleaning every surface, checking every book. My heart sank as I watched her pocket something small and white. That evening, she presented a folder to Dr. Klaus during our session. I found these at school. She's been leaving them everywhere, trying to get attention. Dr. Klaus examined the notes with a grave expression. This escalation is concerning. Have you considered inpatient treatment? No. The word tore from my throat. Please, I'll stop. I'll be good. I'll be quiet. My mother's eyes glinted with satisfaction. See how she bargains? Classic manipulation. I think we should increase her medication, Dr. Klaus said, and perhaps implement a more structured behavioral plan at home. The new pills made everything worse. The world felt wrapped in cotton, my thoughts slow and sticky. Combined with the constant white noise, I existed in a bubble of sensory deprivation. Days blended together in a haze of muffled sound and foggy consciousness. My mother added cameras to my room, for my safety, she told Dr. Klaus. Now she watched everything. When I slept, when I changed, when I did homework. The headphones stayed on even in the bathroom now, except for the brief moments needed for basic hygiene. I learned she'd been documenting everything for years. During one therapy session, she produced journals dating back to when I was 4. Detailed accounts of my supposed noise-making, my deliberate attempts to trigger her misophonia, my malicious behavior. All fiction, but meticulously crafted. You can see the pattern, she told Dr. Klaus, flipping through pages of lies. The escalation over time. I've tried so hard to be patient, to understand, but she seems determined to hurt me. I wanted to scream that none of it was real, but the medication made it hard to form words. My protest came out slurred, confused, which only reinforced her narrative of a disturbed child. School became my only escape from the headphones, but even that was tainted. My mother volunteered 3 days a week now, always watching, always nearby. Teachers praised her dedication. Other parents admired her strength in dealing with such a difficult child. The substitute teacher, Ms. Seaby, still appeared occasionally. She'd learned to avoid me, but sometimes I caught her watching with haunted eyes. Whatever my mother had done to scare her, it had worked. One morning, I woke up dizzy. The room spun when I sat up, and I had to grip the bed frame to keep from falling. The medication doses had increased again, and I suspected my mother was adding extra to my food. At breakfast, I struggled to lift my spoon. My mother watched with false concern. You seem tired, sweetheart. Maybe you should stay home today. No, I managed. School meant no headphones. School meant a break from the white noise that was slowly driving me insane. If you insist, she said, but I saw her make a note in her journal. At school, I could barely stay awake. During PE, while attempting to run laps, my legs gave out. I collapsed on the track, the world tilting sideways. I woke in the nurse's office again. Nurse Patricia was taking my blood pressure. Her face creased with worry. Your blood pressure is very low, she said, and your pulse is irregular. What medications are you taking? I tried to remember the names, but my thoughts were too fuzzy. Pills, I mumbled. For my condition, she frowned. I need to see a medication list. This could be an interaction issue. My mother arrived within minutes, as if she'd been waiting for the call. She handed over a typed list to Nurse Patricia, explaining each medication, the dosages, the prescribing doctor. These doses seem very high for a child her age, Nurse Patricia said carefully. Dr. Klaus is a specialist, my mother replied smoothly. He knows what he's doing. Perhaps you'd like to call him? She produced Dr. Klaus's business card. Nurse Patricia did call, and I listened to her side of the conversation, growing more subdued as Dr. Klaus no doubt explained my severe behavioral disorders and the necessity of aggressive treatment. When she hung up, Nurse Patricia looked defeated. He says the medications are appropriate for her condition, but I'm going to document this incident thoroughly. My mother's smile was razor sharp. Of course, documentation is so important. As she drove me home, my mother was silent until we reached a red light. Then she turned to look at me. You're getting sloppy, she said quietly, making scenes, drawing attention. That needs to stop. The medicine makes me sick, I whispered. The medicine keeps you manageable, she corrected. Would you prefer the alternative? I didn't ask what the alternative was. I already knew. The soundproof closet she'd built in the basement, discovered during one of my foggy explorations while she was at the store. A small, dark space with padding on the walls, a lock on the outside. That night, she showed me a new journal entry she was writing. Daughter exhibited substance-seeking behavior today. Attempted to convince school nurse to change her medications. When confronted, became agitated and accusatory. Concerning escalation in manipulative behaviors. Everything was backwards. Every cry for help became evidence against me. Every symptom of her abuse became proof of my illness. The next morning, I could barely get out of bed. My mother had to practically carry me to the car. At school, I slumped at my desk, the world swimming in and out of focus. Mrs. Henderson noticed immediately. She knelt beside my desk during independent reading time. Are you feeling all right? I wanted to tell her everything. The medications, the edited recordings, the soundproof closet waiting in the basement. But the words wouldn't come. My tongue felt too heavy, my thoughts too scattered. Medicine, I managed to whisper. She glanced toward the door where my mother was undoubtedly lurking somewhere in the building. I'm going to talk to the principal, she said quietly. This isn't right. But by lunch, I saw Mrs. Henderson in the principal's office with my mother. Through the window, I watched my mother pull out her phone, show something on the screen. Mrs. Henderson's face went pale. She nodded slowly, then left the office without looking back. My mother caught my eye through the window and smiled. That afternoon, Mrs. Henderson avoided me. When I tried to approach her desk after class, she busied herself with papers. You should get to your next class, she said without looking up. Another ally lost. Another adult who'd tried to help, silenced by whatever my mother had shown her. I wondered what it was this time. Edited videos of me being violent, fabricated threats I'd supposedly made. The possibilities were endless when you controlled the narrative. The days blurred worse after that. My mother increased the medications again, claiming I was showing increased agitation at school. The white noise from the headphones mixed with the fog in my brain until I wasn't sure what was real anymore. Sometimes I thought I heard her voice through the static, whispering things I couldn't quite make out. Sometimes I woke up in different clothes than I'd gone to bed in, with no memory of changing. The cameras in my room recorded everything, but I never saw the footage, just knew it existed, another weapon in her arsenal. During a particularly bad week, when I could barely walk straight, the fire alarm went off at school. The sudden loud noise sent panic through my medication-dulled system. I tried to stand, to follow the evacuation procedure, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I made it 3 steps before crashing to the floor. This time, I didn't get up. I woke in the hospital. The beeping of machines and the absence of white noise was so jarring, I started crying. A doctor I didn't recognize was examining me, her face serious. Can you tell me what medications you're taking? She asked gently. I tried to remember, but my mother appeared in the doorway before I could speak. Oh, thank goodness, she cried, rushing to my bedside. I was so worried. She hasn't been taking her medications properly, hiding them, spitting them out. Dr. Klaus warned this might happen. The doctor frowned. The blood tests show extremely high levels of sedatives in her system, far above therapeutic doses. She must have taken extra, my mother said quickly. She's been hoarding them. I found a stash in her room just yesterday. I was about to call Dr. Klaus about it. I need to speak with the patient alone, the doctor said firmly. My mother's grip on my hand tightened painfully. Of course, but you should know she's been diagnosed with severe oppositional defiant disorder and a tendency toward manipulation. Dr. Klaus can provide full documentation. After she left, the doctor pulled her chair closer. I'm Dr. Sarah. I want to help you. Can you tell me what's really happening? I wanted to trust her. Her eyes seemed kind, her concern genuine, but I'd trusted before, and it always ended the same way. My mom gives me the medicine, I whispered, more than the bottles say. Dr. Sarah made notes. Has anyone else noticed this? Everyone notices. No one does anything. The words came out bitter, hopeless. She has documentation for everything. Recordings, videos, journals going back years. What kind of recordings? I tried to explain the edited audio, the fabricated evidence, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. It sounded crazy, even to me. A mother meticulously crafting years of false documentation to abuse her child while appearing to be the perfect parent? Who would believe that? Dr. Sarah ordered more tests, spoke to Dr. Klaus on the phone, reviewed my mother's documentation. With each conversation, her initial concern faded into professional distance. By the time I was discharged 2 days later, the narrative was set. I'd been hoarding medication and took too much in a cry for attention. My mother was praised for her vigilance in finding my stash and seeking help. The ride home was silent except for the white noise pumping through my headphones. My mother had brought them to the hospital, explaining to the staff that they helped with my sensory issues. At home, she led me straight to the basement. The soundproof closet was smaller than I'd remembered, maybe 4 feet by 4 feet, with thick padding on every surface. No light switch inside, just darkness once the door closed. Dr. Klaus agrees you need more intensive intervention, she said calmly. This is a safe space for you to work through your behaviors without hurting yourself or others. Please, I begged, but she was already guiding me inside. 2 hours to start, she said. We'll work up from there. The padding blocks all sound, so you can make all the noise you want. Therapeutic, really. The door closed. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed me whole. In the absolute silence and darkness, time lost meaning. Was it minutes or hours? My medication-foggy brain couldn't track it. I tried counting seconds, but kept losing track. Starting over, losing track again. When the door finally opened, the light was blinding. My mother helped me out, her touch gentle, her voice concerned. How do you feel? Did it help? I couldn't speak. My throat was raw from screaming I couldn't even hear. She marked something in her journal. We'll try again tomorrow. Dr. Klaus says consistency is key. The pattern established itself quickly. School, where I struggled to stay conscious through classes. Home, where the headphones went on immediately. Dinner, medication hidden in my food. Then the closet for therapeutic isolation. I tried leaving notes at school again, but my handwriting had deteriorated from the medication. The words came out shaky, illegible. When a teacher found one, they brought it straight to my mother during her volunteer shift. See what I mean? She told them sadly. The writing exercises Dr. Klaus recommended aren't helping. If anything, she's regressing. Ms. Seeby appeared less and less. When I did see her, she looked hollow, frightened. Whatever my mother had done to her went beyond simple threats. I wanted to ask, but we were never alone, and I could barely form coherent sentences anyway. One day, during a brief moment of clarity between medications, I realized my mother had been preparing for this my whole life. Every documented incident, every piece of evidence, every professional she'd fooled. It was all intentional. She'd built an impenetrable fortress of lies with me trapped inside. The school held a meeting about my deteriorating condition. I sat there, swaying slightly from the medication, while adults discussed my fate. My mother presented her evidence, the journals, the recordings, the notes I'd left, the medication hoarding, the hospital incident. We're considering residential treatment, she told them, tears in her eyes. Dr. Klaus knows an excellent facility that specializes in cases like hers. Principal Morrison looked troubled. This seems like quite an escalation. Perhaps we should get a second opinion? My mother's face hardened for just a moment before the tears returned. Of course, if you think that's best. Though I worry about the delay. She's getting worse every day. Mrs. Henderson spoke up quietly. I've noticed she seems heavily medicated. Perhaps that's contributing to— Are you a medical professional? My mother interrupted. Because Dr. Klaus is. As was Dr. Sarah at the hospital. As is her pediatrician who signs off on all her prescriptions. I'm doing everything I can to help my daughter. And frankly, these accusations are hurtful. The meeting ended with apologies to my mother and promises of support. Another victory for her. Another defeat for me. That night, the closet time extended to 4 hours. In the darkness, I felt my sanity slipping away. The combination of sensory deprivation, medication, and isolation was breaking me down exactly as she'd planned. When I emerged, I could barely stand. She had to help me up the stairs, her grip firm, but not gentle anymore. You're almost there, she whispered, almost ready for the next phase. I didn't ask what the next phase was. In my medication-addled mind, I already knew. She was going to make me disappear, just like the child she'd had before me, the one who'd moved away to live with relatives, the one no one could contact. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, I felt only exhausted acceptance. She'd won. She'd always been going to win. But then, during library time at school, something unexpected happened. I was slumped at a table, pretending to read while fighting to keep my eyes open, when someone sat down across from me. It was Ms. Seeby. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that matched mine. She didn't speak, just slid a book across the table. Inside the cover was a single line written in pencil. She did this to another child. I found proof. My heart, sluggish from medication, tried to race. I looked up at her, hope and fear warring in my chest. She glanced around, then wrote more. The guidance counselor is building a case. Real evidence. Hold on. Before I could respond, she was gone, leaving the book behind. I tucked it into my backpack, the first spark of hope I'd felt in months. That evening, my mother seemed agitated. She kept checking her phone, pacing the kitchen while I ate dinner in silence. There's been some staff turnover at your school, she said finally. Nothing for you to worry about. But I could see the calculation in her eyes, the wheels turning as she adjusted her plans. Something had shifted, and she knew it. The medications that night tasted different, stronger. I fought to stay conscious, knowing that falling asleep might mean never waking up, or waking up somewhere far from here, where no one would ever find me. As darkness crept in despite my efforts, I heard her on the phone with Dr. Klaus. Yes, I think it's time. The residential facility you mentioned, how soon could they take her? The last thing I remembered was her standing in my doorway, silhouetted against the hall light. Soon, sweetheart, she said softly. Very soon, this will all be over. I woke to my mother shaking me roughly. The room was still dark, but I could make out her silhouette against the hallway light. My head felt like it was stuffed with wet cotton from whatever she'd put in my dinner. Get up, we're leaving. Her voice was clipped, urgent. I tried to sit up, but my limbs felt disconnected from my body. She yanked me upright, shoving clothes into my arms. The headphones were already on my head, the white noise drowning out whatever else she was saying. She dragged me to the car, practically throwing me into the back seat. Through the medication haze, I noticed suitcases in the trunk. We were really leaving. The residential facility Dr. Klaus mentioned, or somewhere worse. The car started moving. I pressed my face against the cold window, watching our house disappear. My mother kept checking the rearview mirror, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. At a red light, she turned to look at me. Her lips moved, but I couldn't hear through the white noise. She reached back and ripped the headphones off. Listen carefully. When we get there, you say nothing. You're sick. You need help. That's all anyone needs to know. Where are we going? My voice came out slurred. Somewhere they understand difficult children. She shoved the headphones back on. The drive felt endless. I dozed fitfully, waking each time we stopped. Gas stations, rest stops, all blurring together. My mother never let me out of the car, just handed me water and crackers that tasted like chalk. Dawn was breaking when we finally stopped. Through bleary eyes, I saw a large building surrounded by high walls. It looked more like a prison than a treatment center. My mother pulled me from the car, her grip bruising on my arm. At the entrance, a woman in scrubs was waiting. "Mrs. Chen, we've been expecting you." Dr. Klaus called ahead. They spoke over my head while I swayed on unsteady feet. Papers were signed. Money changed hands. The woman in scrubs took my other arm. "We'll take good care of her," she assured my mother. My mother knelt in front of me, her face a mask of false concern. "Be good. Do what they tell you. This is for your own good." Then she was walking away, getting in the car, driving off without looking back. The woman in scrubs led me inside. The doors locked behind us with a heavy click. She removed my headphones, and the sudden absence of white noise made me dizzy. "Welcome to Peaceful Meadows. I'm Nurse Ratched. Let's get you settled." She led me through sterile hallways that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Other children passed us, all with the same vacant expressions, the same shuffling walk. This wasn't a treatment center. It was a warehouse for unwanted kids. My room was small, white, empty, except for a bed bolted to the floor. No windows. A camera in the corner, its red light blinking steadily. "Medication time is at 8, noon, 4, and 8, Nurse Ratched said. "Meals in the cafeteria, no talking during quiet hours. Break the rules and you'll spend time in the reflection room." She left, locking the door behind her. I collapsed on the thin mattress, finally allowing myself to process what had happened. My mother had won. She'd successfully disappeared me just like the other child Ms. Seeby mentioned. But Ms. Seeby had found proof. Mrs. Henderson was building a case. They knew something was wrong. They had to be looking for me. Days passed in a medicated blur. The pills here were different, but just as numbing. I shuffled to meals, sat through group therapy, where we weren't allowed to actually speak, stared at white walls during reflection time. I tried to keep track of time, but the days blended together. No windows, no clocks, no way to know if it had been a week or a month. The other kids didn't talk about how long they'd been here. Some looked like they'd forgotten there was an outside world at all. Then one day during lunch, something changed. Nurse Ratched was called away urgently. The other staff members huddled by the door, whispering frantically. Through the cafeteria windows, I saw police cars in the parking lot. My heart began to race. They'd found me. Someone had finally believed the truth and come looking. But the police cars left without entering the building. The staff returned to their posts, watching us more carefully than before. Whatever had happened, it wasn't about me. That night, unable to sleep, I heard voices in the hallway. Nurse Ratched and someone else, arguing in hushed tones. They're asking questions about the Chen girl. Someone filed a missing person report. Her mother has all the paperwork. Legal commitment, signed by a licensed psychiatrist. Still, if they come back with a warrant, they won't. Dr. Klaus assured us everything is in order. My spark of hope flickered and died. Even here, my mother's web of lies protected her. More days passed. The medications made it hard to think, hard to plan. I stopped trying to count the days, stopped hoping someone would come. This was my life now. Then during morning medications, I noticed something different. The nurse handing out pills wasn't one I recognized. She was younger, with kind eyes that actually looked at us instead of through us. When she reached me, she paused. Her hand shook slightly as she held out the paper cup of pills. As I took it, I felt something else pressed into my palm, a folded piece of paper. I quickly palmed it, pretending to swallow the pills while tucking the paper into my sleeve. The new nurse moved on without comment. Back in my room, I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. The writing was familiar, Ms. Seeby's careful script. "We know where you are. Hold on. Soon." I ate the paper, not trusting anywhere to hide it. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than numb acceptance. They hadn't given up. They were still fighting for me. The next few days, I watched everything more carefully. The new nurse appeared regularly, always during medication times. She never spoke to me directly, never gave any sign she was anything other than a new employee, but I noticed things. How she actually checked that other kids swallowed their pills, but never checked mine. How she sometimes stood where she could block the camera's view of me. How her shifts seemed to coincide with when the regular staff was thinnest. 3 days after the note, chaos erupted. I woke to sirens, lots of them. Through my door, I could hear running footsteps, shouting voices. Someone was pounding on the main entrance, demanding to be let in. My door flew open. The new nurse stood there, breathing hard. "We have to go, now." She grabbed my hand and pulled me into the hallway. It was pandemonium. Staff members were running in all directions. Some were shoving papers into shredders. Others were trying to corral confused kids back into their rooms. The nurse led me through a side door I'd never seen opened. We emerged into a loading dock where an unmarked van was waiting. Mrs. Henderson was behind the wheel, her face grim but determined. "Get in," she urged. As we pulled away, I saw police officers streaming into the building. Some were leading staff members out in handcuffs. Others were helping dazed children into ambulances. "Ms. Seeby found records," Mrs. Henderson explained as she drove. "Your mother had done this before. A child named Marcus, 5 years ago. He supposedly went to live with relatives, but Ms. Seeby tracked him down. He'd been in that place for 3 years before aging out of the system." My hands wouldn't stop shaking. "My mom? Arrested this morning. The police found the soundproof closet, the doctored recordings, everything. Dr. Klaus, too. Turns out he'd been taking bribes to commit children whose parents wanted them gone. The drive back felt surreal. Real sunlight, real air, freedom I'd thought I'd never have again. At the hospital, doctors ran tests, documenting the over-medication, the malnutrition, the psychological trauma. Ms. Rodriguez was there, tears in her eyes as she apologized for not seeing through my mother's lies sooner. "The system failed you," she said, "but we're going to make it right." Ms. Seeby came by, looking exhausted but relieved. She explained how she'd started investigating after my mother threatened her, how she'd found a pattern of complaints that were always dismissed, children who disappeared into the system. "Your Morse code saved your life," she told me. It made me dig deeper. The next weeks were a blur of police interviews, court hearings, medical appointments. My mother was charged with child endangerment, false imprisonment, and conspiracy. Dr. Klaus faced even more charges. Apparently, I wasn't his only victim. During the trial, the full extent of my mother's planning came out. The years of fabricated documentation, the careful manipulation of every adult who tried to help, the calculated destruction of my credibility. Even the prosecutors seemed stunned by the thoroughness of her deception. She was convicted on all charges, 25 years in prison. Dr. Klaus got 30. The facility was shut down, its operators arrested, the children relocated to real treatment centers or foster homes. I was placed with my aunt, my mother's sister, who'd been searching for me since I disappeared. She was nothing like my mother. Warm, loud, encouraging me to make noise, to take up space, to exist without fear. The recovery wasn't easy. Years of conditioning don't disappear overnight. I still flinched at sudden sounds, still caught myself walking too quietly, still sometimes reached for headphones that weren't there. But slowly, with therapy, real therapy, and patience, I began to heal. I learned to speak above a whisper. I joined the school choir, surrounded myself with music and laughter and all the sounds my mother had forbidden. Mrs. Henderson visited regularly, bringing cookies and homework and normalcy. Ms. Seeby helped me with Morse code, turning my trauma into a skill I could be proud of. Even Ms. Rodriguez checked in, determined to prevent other children from falling through the cracks. The day I testified at my mother's sentencing, I spoke clearly and loudly. I told the court about the point system, the starvation, the soundproof closet. I looked her in the eye as I described years of torture disguised as parenting. She tried to speak, to spin one more lie, but the judge cut her off. I've heard enough. The evidence is overwhelming. The defendant will serve the maximum sentence. As they led her away, she turned to look at me one last time. I didn't flinch, didn't go silent. I stood tall and watched her disappear into the system she'd tried to trap me in. That night, my aunt made my favorite dinner, steak, cooked medium rare, tender enough to chew without effort. We ate together, talking and laughing, filling the house with all the sounds of a real family. I started 10th grade at a new school where nobody knew my story, made friends who didn't understand why I got so happy about simple things like humming in the hallway or tapping my pencil during tests. The nightmares faded, the flinching stopped. I learned to trust adults again, to ask for help without fear of punishment, to exist loudly and proudly in a world that no longer demanded my silence. On the anniversary of my rescue, I got a letter from Marcus, the boy who'd come before me. He thanked me for being brave enough to signal for help, for breaking the cycle. He was in college now, studying social work, determined to help kids like us. I wrote back, telling him about my new life, how I'd joined drama club, debate team, anything that required me to use my voice, how I was thinking about becoming a teacher myself, someone who would notice when children went too quiet. My aunt framed the court documents declaring my mother's loss of parental rights, not out of spite, but as proof that justice was possible, that truth could overcome even the most elaborate lies. I kept the Morse code book Ms. Seeby had given me, but now I used it for fun, teaching friends secret codes, tapping out jokes during boring assemblies. What had once been a desperate cry for help became just another way to communicate. The investigation revealed my mother had never actually had misophonia. It was all an elaborate excuse for control, a way to justify the torture. The real condition was hers, a pathological need to dominate, to silence, to erase. But she'd failed. I was still here, still breathing, still speaking, still making all the noise I wanted. On my 18th birthday, I stood in my aunt's kitchen, surrounded by friends and chosen family. As they sang happy birthday, loudly, joyfully, beautifully off-key, I closed my eyes and let the sound wash over me. I was free.